We're live.
We're live.
What's up, dude?
What's going on?
Not much. Just excited that we're recording our first podcast, that we don't even have a name to the show yet.
That's what we call ripping the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, this episode, we're just kind of figure out what the hell we're doing, because me and Brad are longtime friends. My name is Josh Jacobs. This is Brad Mora. We'll talk about ourselves in a second. But we've been friends for a very long time. We grew up in the same neighborhood. And now that we're in our 30s, we've done a lot of things in business and we've kept in touch. And, you know, we kind of just decided to start this podcast to document our journey, document our business growth, our personal growth, all sorts of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But basically, we just are hopping on right now with really no clue what we're doing. And, you know, just kind of try to figure it out. So you guys are going to get to watch that in real time. But yeah, so I figure the best way for us to start is we can each talk a little bit about, you know, why we want to start a podcast, maybe a little bit about our stories. I think that would be a good place to kind of start this first episode. So maybe you could start and talk a little bit about first why you even want to start a podcast in the first place.
So the reason I'm doing this is it's something I've thought about doing for a long time, but have never actually found the inertia to go start doing. And in the spirit of continuing to build momentum with the things that I'm doing in my life, this was seeded by you. You reached out and said you want to do a podcast. And I said, if I don't take this opportunity now, the fruit's never been hanging lower. And so for the pure sake of doing something I've thought about doing, for the sake of doing it, this is an excellent opportunity to do that. All at the same time, while getting to capture the value of connecting more deeply with somebody that I think has the same goals and same mindset. And honestly, you have a mindset that I'm striving to work towards in terms of the level of discipline that you have displayed over the past 5 years. And so I think at the core of it, it's an opportunity for me to show inertia on something I've thought about doing. And then on top of that, I get to have the added value of being in a conversation with somebody who's probably a step ahead of where I want to be in terms of the discipline that they hold in their life. And with that, I think this ultimately can also act as it's weekly accountability for the things that we want to be doing in our lives. I think you and I share not the same goals, but the goals that sit at the same level in terms of where we want to be personally and professionally. And so the last thing I want to do is come on this show weekly talking about what my goals are and look like a jackass for not having made improvements against them. And so this is in its own right, it's an opportunity to be accountable to just doing shit. And then at the same time, the show itself can act as a platform for accountability for me. So that's how I'm thinking about it today. And third thing I think to add on top of that is just getting comfortable talking live about my ideas, presenting opinions cohesively. I think this is only a skill that benefits you in every part of your life, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your professional life when you're engaging with your teams, clients, sales. This is just a great way. It's a low stakes training ground to improve skills that I know are going to benefit me everywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I was in the shower. I get a lot of good ideas when I'm in the shower. It's where a lot of my ideas come from. I don't know why. And I texted you while I was in the shower, want to start a podcast or something like that. And you responded almost instantly like, I'm so down, or I don't even remember what it was, but that's how it happened. And I'm very happy it did. So thank you for sharing that. I feel the exact same way. I want to be able to connect with you every single week. I think every time that we talk, I always leave it feeling energized and inspired. And really, I've watched a lot of content recently. I've read a lot of books recently. And one of the most important things I believe people go through in a phase of growth is transcending self. And instead of doing everything for yourself, you start doing things for others. And while I hope that we get lots out of this podcast in the future, me and you personally, I really believe deeply in podcasts have helped me come out of a very dark place in my life. And I think it's my duty now to talk about all the things going on in my life and maybe help somebody else who was in a dark place like me come out of it. And I also think in the future, like how cool would it be to, in 30 years from now, have my kids who are, I don't have kids yet, but my kids who are grown at that point, be able to go back and watch us documenting, building our businesses, getting super fit, having great relationships, doing all these things in our life. That to me is a really, really interesting idea. So that's one of the reasons. Also, networking with people I think is going to be great. But for the most part, I want to share these lessons. I want to connect with you. And I think it's going to be a great thing. So just so you guys know, we basically decided on a whim that we were just going to record today, started setting up all of our shit today, like literally an hour ago. Microphone not even working properly yet. Camera not working properly yet. We're figuring everything out as we go. And I think that's one of the first lessons that we like tell ourselves is just, stop having over analysis paralysis or whatever, and just rip, like you said, as soon as we started this show, rip the Band-Aid off and just start, and you'll figure it out as you go. The majority of people never even start doing something. So I'm excited to talk all about all of the things that we've started in the past. But first, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself so that we could kind of each share our story. And, one of the things that you guys will hear me talk about all the time is I believe so deeply in only taking advice from people who have done things that you want to do in your life. So you're not going to sit here and listen to me and Brad tell you how to become billionaires yet, because we're not billionaires. We can't give you advice on how to become billionaires. I can't give you advice on how to get a six-pack because I don't have a six-pack yet. But there are definitely things in our life that we are qualified to speak on. And I think that's super important, just to understand, a little bit about our backgrounds, where we come from, a little bit about what we've done, and maybe our goals going forward and what we're working on now. So if you want to start out, just tell us maybe a little bit about, what you've been doing over the last 10 years or whatever, and what you're doing now.
For sure. And I think what you said is important, that anytime anything is in the form of advice, there'll be a clear distinction between things that we've done and are qualified to talk about and things that we're drawing on from other people's experiences who are further along from us that we want to draw on and share because we've consumed that content. We're packaging up and reiterating good things that we've heard. But yeah, I think an intellectual honesty about the difference between those two is not something that we'll be short on in this show. One other thing I wanted to touch on, because what I thought you said was great about doing this for other people. And I think that was just to take a second to reflect on that framework, because it really leaves you in a place of like, what's the worst that could happen? We make 100 episodes of this, and the worst thing that could happen is that somebody somewhere might get some benefit from it. And so at the end of the day, like, how the hell can you not get started on something like this? And so I thought what you said, it's a script change from how I've been thinking about this. And it actually takes some of the pressure off in the first place of like, why do it when the worst thing you could do is maybe help somebody else? And then
totally. Yeah. To add to that, by the way, is, as I grow in my business, I really want to start working on things that I'm super excited about. And I think I told you before we even started this, like, I want to make this the thing that I look forward to every single week. And regardless of whatever outcomes come from it, like you said, we could have 100 episodes and who knows where we'll be. But to me, just having a conversation with you about whatever we're going to talk about over the course of this show, I believe will be super beneficial to me and you every single week. I think it's going to keep us accountable. Like you said, I think it's going to give us ideas and keep us inspired. But I do also believe in the fact that it will help some people out there. So there is no pressure. There is no outcome that needs to be necessary. It's just going to be me and you talking, and we'll see if there's any other knuckleheads that want to listen to us.
So you asked what have we been doing over the past 10 years? And so started like the end of college, went to University of Illinois, studied accounting, finance, and that whatever value is in that. I question to this day the value of college just in terms of like the practical skills you leave with. Honestly, probably did not in any way put in what you needed to put in to get out of college, what the maximum amount of value could be. And during that period of time, reflect on like just my entire frame of reference of how to spend time and what is important was skewed. But left college and started in investment banking. I called it a C- investment bank. Hopefully they're not listening to this. But it's lower middle market in Chicago. But basically, and the most important thing that ever came out of that was you help people who have built small businesses. And when I say small, it's like $100 million sales, $200 million sales. And so large in the scheme of things, but small in the larger context of business. Help them sell their businesses. It's basically like a real estate agent for those size businesses. But what you get to see is these are homegrown, gritty entrepreneurs that have spent a decade or more, or it's a family business, building something really incredible and then going through the exit of seeing the other side of running that business. And so that was where I got the viewpoint that if you really want to make generational wealth, if you really want true freedom in your life, because you could tell these people just operate in a different way than I did being in like the corporate machine, that there was something to that. And so I did that for about 18 months. The grind in that was terrible. And also whatever cognitive dissonance I was left with from like helping people sell their businesses while I was in like crushing corporate life, it was an increasingly difficult thing to stomach. And so I started to question like, what is the way out of this? I definitely didn't have the right answers at the time, nor necessarily the right frameworks to go pursue things outside of the corporate world. So I then left to go work at Uber, it was in between when Uber was truly on its come up, but before it was like a corporate behemoth. And so spent 3 years there. I hate to call it, there was some good learnings throughout that period of time, but I would say it was somewhat on a treadmill of even though in my mind I'm going to work at a startup, this is one step closer to running a business. This is one step closer to autonomy and the things that I had decided that I wanted to be doing after working in that investment banking job. It still ended up being a corporate ladder to be climbed in its own right, especially just given the size of Uber. And so while I was working there, I went through a couple iterations of like, how do I leave? What are businesses that I could go work on? Again, I think without the proper frameworks and the proper skills to actually go effectively leave. But after 3 years there, I took looking back now, what was an irresponsible business risk, one that really wasn't vetted out enough, in starting a cannabis beverage business. I actually saw the Blue Moon guy. I saw an article that he had started. He had left Coors and he was going to start essentially the Blue Moon of cannabis beverage. So in my mind, the space had to be hot. Didn't do a ton of other diligence other than that. Saw a couple other people had started raising money. So I decided to rip the Band-Aid. And that was an important lesson because otherwise it never got started. That I quit that job and then moved to Sacramento to start a cannabis beverage business. And at that point in time, I was starting the business, trying to figure out how do I go to market with a cannabis infused cider. And so it's basically you put weed, you put THC into a drink, you drink it, you get high. It's kind of like alcohol, but instead you get high. And didn't really know my ass from my head, but was just pushing forward to get the business started. Ended up meeting a manufacturer to help me build the drinks. They had their own set of problems at the time, and I saw the writing on the wall that it was a better opportunity to go work with them than it probably was to go run my own brand. And so I bought another partnership, essentially became a founding member of their team because they were also a startup, and then took over as CEO of that business. And so a lot of trials and tribulations and a lot of bruises from running that for 3 years, but we then sold that to a larger cannabis company last year. And so over the past year, I worked for the larger cannabis company, still running the manufacturing facility, figuring out and helping them with their drink strategy. candidly, cannabis isn't the shit right now. And so we probably got out at like exactly the right time. And with that, I kind of got the branding as like a professional CEO. And so I found a guy he was deciding what to do with his business. And I made the pitch to him, instead of selling, why don't we work together? And then I can help you sell it in a couple of years for more. And so I've come on as CEO, and I'm working with a consulting business now in an entirely separate space on it's technology consulting essentially, but helping early stage startups get their technology right. And so a lot of learning right now, but I'm ramping up on that business.
That's awesome. It's amazing. I've obviously watched your journey, being your friend for a while, and it's just to see you leave your job. And I think you moved to Sacramento, what, like 2 days after you quit or something like that?
Yeah, I quit. And that was
or the next day, literally. It was,
if I just don't like do it, you know?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think, one of the things I love about our dynamic is you've had a ton of experience in the corporate world, and you've obviously had an exit in the corporate world, and you've been CEO in the corporate world. You've ran big teams. I have been in like the solopreneur world almost my entire life, up until recently when we've started growing our team the last year or two. But that I'm excited for that dynamic because we have some differences there. But thank you for sharing that. I'll tell a little bit about my story too, differently than Brad. Brad was a very smart kid growing up. I know he won't say it, but he was very smart, and I was a shithead. So yeah, I was a shithead up until I turned about 18. I never graduated high school. I was a drug addict. I did all these things that just could have ruined my life. And when I turned 18, it was after I'd been in and out of rehab and jail a bunch of times. And I just kind of decided at that moment I needed to change my life. And thank God I did when I was that young, because a lot of people obviously don't do it until they're older, if at all. And when I was, deciding this, I just took all that energy I was putting into negativity, into drug dealing, all this stupid stuff, and I started putting it into positive things and trying to build a business. And I remember I was sitting in college class one day at a local community college because I didn't graduate, but I did get my GED, so I was able to go to college. And I came across this thing called affiliate marketing. And this was, before affiliate marketing was super popular. I learned it, and throughout college, I was able to make 6 figures a year, and just kind of have an experience that was different than most college students. I wasn't really doing college. I was kind of just getting by and building my affiliate marketing business. Long story short, fast forward, I graduated college. I bought a condo. I increased my lifestyle a ton. And within, 6 months of doing all those things, I crashed and burned. And the main company that I was promoting their affiliate products shut down. I was lost. I had no clue what to do. I thought I was the absolute king, 21, 22, 23 years old, like making money, doing all this stupid shit, bottle service, Vegas, whatever. And then I was just completely humbled and, lost my income. Almost, I could have lost my condo. Thankfully, I didn't. It was just a perfect timing of all my expenses going up and all my income going away. And I was left to figure out what the hell to do. And I had never had a job before in my life, keep in mind. I was a drug dealer in high school. And before that, I started an eBay business when I was 12. Like, I have always been the entrepreneur. So when I was left with nothing to do, I decided I had to get a job so I didn't lose my condo. And it was my first job ever. I was like 26 years old and hated it. Was so depressed. It was a good job, but my identity my entire life has been as an entrepreneur. And then I go and get this job, and all of a sudden my identity is just, I didn't even know how to identify anymore, which you hear a lot talked about nowadays. But I didn't know how to identify, like, as an entrepreneur, as an employee, as whatever. Obviously, through lots of work, I realized I can't tie my identity to my career. But long story short, I realized that was not what I wanted to do. I took some action to make some changes and started learning again, got that growth mindset back that I could do anything I put my mind to. And within a matter of 6 months of doing that, I had I was making double the amount of money I was making at my job. I quit that job. And today that business is a multiple 7-figure a year business. So, I think that we have a very good difference in the things that we can talk about while we obviously have a ton of overlap. And I'm super excited about that. And that's a little bit about, that's one thing too, by the way, that I really want to get better on this podcast, that's sharing my story. Like I need to learn how to tell my story better.
100%. I think we probably could both like cut it down by like 30 or 40%. And then there was a couple things you said that are like hit home. The way you described there was an authenticity. I didn't know how much detail you were going to go into about like your history, but I actually think that's important because for anyone that is in a spot where they don't feel like they can get out of it, I can tell you, being a third-party observer and watching Josh over the past decade, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Like there's like,
well, that's the thing. We all can, right?
Yeah, we all can. Right? No, that's what like you can, like yeah, there's not a better descriptor than you were kind of a shithead, like through like this period of time in school, and it could have been a lifelong downward spiral. Absolutely no doubt. Like it definitely hit that critical mass, and then to have like make it a roller coaster where you actually hit a peak and then you go back down, and then not to fall into like bad habits from before, but instead just double up. Like I think there's a huge lesson in that. And when you're telling a story like that, to me is like the most important takeaway that I could get from that is like, there's just no excuses. If you can do that, then whoever is listening, they should be able to recognize that the bottom is just the bottom's never the bottom. Like it doesn't have to.
You decide when your bottom is going to be. And I think I'm happy you said that because I actually didn't know if I was going to. It's taken me a very long time to talk about it. I mean, I haven't done drugs this is a long time ago. I mean, I stopped 12 years ago. And it took me a really long time to talk about it. When I first like got into business and I used to make YouTube videos and all this stuff, I never mentioned a word about it. I always came off as, somebody who was straight edge and whatever. And I realized over the last however many years that you have to talk about that stuff, not just for, the people who out there, but even for me, like I have to talk about that stuff because it's part of my story. And if I never went through that, I wouldn't be where I am today. If you never went through certain things that you've been through, you wouldn't be where you are today. And I think it's super important for anybody listening to just know that wherever you are in your life, you can be somewhere completely different in a year from now, even 90 days from now. I mean, honestly, all it really takes to, I'm not saying you're going to, become a millionaire and get a six-pack in 90 days. But what I'm saying is if you take 90 days to truly commit to being disciplined and going towards some sort of goal that you want, you may not hit that goal in 90 days, but in those 90 days, you will transform as a person into somebody who is capable of hitting that goal. And I think that is the key that we're going to be talking about on this podcast is just, we both have these big goals in our personal lives and our business lives. And how are we going to document that process of us becoming those people capable of achieving those goals and show the world that, you could do anything you want to do. And we're going to be proof of that over the next few years as you guys watch us, grow into the people that we want to be.
I think what you just said struck a chord for me. I have this it's a nugget of like a theory, maybe not a nugget of a theory, but something that I'm like wrestling with mentally is just like this concept of compounding interest. And so like those first 90 days are so critical because you can't develop compounding interest in whatever it is that you want to do, whether it's professionally, whether it's relationships, whether it's your body, it's all rooted in my mind. Like the true end goal of what most people have is rooted in some form of compound interest, but you need to develop the muscle to start developing compounding interest. And so when you talk about the 90 days, it's like just the skill set of repetition in whatever it is you're doing, regardless of what it is that you're doing, that skill set of the repetition itself you can't achieve anything of magnitude without compounding interest. And I think most things in life, as far as if you're going to measure them with a success metric, with the absence of health, probably all come in some sort of exponential curve. And so it's like that most of the value of what you're doing is actually going to come in like years 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. But you gotta do the compounding interest in the first 4 or 5 years, even without the results per se, to get to where you're going. And so, but then break that down into a practical, like, how do you take down an elephant? It's like one bite at a time. Like, you got to start with 90 days and just do one thing well for 90 days to develop the muscle so that you can build compounding interest over time.
Yeah, because, you may have a goal and you may have no clue how you're going to get there. But if you do 90 days of consistency, in those 90 days, you start to figure out a little bit about how you're going to get there. And maybe not all the way, but then the longer you go, the more opportunities, ideas, the more knowledge, just different things come into your mind by using that muscle. I like that word that you said, like discipline literally is a muscle. If you exercise discipline every single day, I could tell you firsthand, I've quit drugs. I've lost 100 pounds. I've quit my job. Like all those things require discipline, but I am not naturally a disciplined person. Naturally, I want to sit around, sleep all day, eat Oreos, smoke weed. Like I don't want to do shit. But by flexing that discipline muscle for, like you said, now it's been literally 3-4 years. By flexing that muscle, it gets easier and easier every time I get off track, it gets a lot easier to get back into discipline mode because I have that discipline muscle now. And I think that's the perfect word to use it. Like it is a muscle and you got to flex it every single day to keep growing it. And, but the good news is once you have it a little bit, muscle comes back quickly. So, flex that discipline every single day.
Yeah, I think it's the concept of like probably the first 7 years of my just career post-college like life. The whole time felt like I was on a treadmill, and it's like you kind of do you fall into the same habits, you do the same things, and they don't.
Like you're running but not getting towards your goal.
You're running,
like you're working hard,
but time in life is all going to move. Like the passage of time is a consistent thing that you're just going to. We all get the same number of minutes. And during that period of time, it's during those 7 years, it felt like a treadmill. Like there's no going up. There's no true change happening. It's just time moves, but I'm motionless in that period of time. And I think discipline is a huge lever for not feeling like you're on a treadmill. And it comes back to that concept of like building compounding interest, compounding results over time. You can't do it if you're just a sporadic set of bad habits. Like it just doesn't lead to any cohesive path towards anything because nothing is matching up with itself to get where you want to go. And so I think when you're talking about discipline, I think about that as like getting off the treadmill. Like if you have like getting towards a goal is getting off the treadmill. If the goal's over here and you're on a treadmill, you're never going to get to that goal. But as soon as you inject discipline into the mix, now all of a sudden you've got a way to get off that treadmill and you've got a way to start making motion in your life towards something. And then just the act of, like you said, getting and moving that motion forward, that's like a habit in its own right that you can start to develop.
And you have to rely on discipline for that because people talk about, this is talked about all the time, but it was a huge factor for me years ago when I started listening to this type of content is, people want motivation, but motivation is not real. Discipline is what's real because there's not a single, maybe there's some freaks out there, but like there's not a single person in the world that wakes up every morning early and works out that as soon as the alarm goes off, they say, oh, I want to go and work out and get up at 5 a.m. and, go run. Nobody thinks that. Maybe some people do. Like I said, there are some freaks out there, but like, I guarantee you that 99% of people that wake up at 5 a.m. and go run 5 miles do not wake up and within 30 seconds want to go run 5 miles, but they have discipline with habits that get them to go up and run those 5 miles. And after you've been doing that every single day for a year, it's a lot easier than the first 7 days that you have to do it because that discipline is a muscle. And if you flex it for a year, it's going to become a whole lot easier to flex it. So honestly, I think that was like perfect for our first episode. I don't know if you want to add anything, but I think, people at least know a little bit about why we want to do this, what our stories are. I'm sure we're going to get way deeper into, some of the things that we've done and what we're working on. But I don't know. Like we started this out. We're just fucking figuring it out.
100%. I think I'll close with, like I said at the beginning, I view you as a role model for discipline. And I think part of this podcast, I think the level of discipline I've shown in my life has increased tenfold since I began, but there's still there's another level for me to get onto. And so I think is even part of this podcast and weekly interactions with you, it's putting a system in place for me to exert more discipline in my life. And so I think I have an appreciation for this is something I'm going to get out of that. So
let's make that a goal so thank you. First of all, I really appreciate you saying that. But that being said, the biggest problem that I have is losing discipline when I travel. That's my number one excuse is to get off my program when I'm going to fly somewhere. I'm going on a business trip. I'm doing X, Y, or Z, a personal trip. It's my number one flaw. I always screw up when I travel. And I do not want to make that mistake this year. I have, 10 flights in the next 3 months, 10 different trips that I'm going on. So I'm going to use this to keep myself accountable, to stay disciplined no matter what, even when I'm traveling and doing those things. And if I fuck up, I will come and say it. But I think we should hold each other accountable every week on our own goals and our own discipline that we want to stick to. And I do think that it will help us by being accountable to each other, being accountable to the show. And I think by the end of this year, we're both going to have fucking six packs and we're going to be worth a lot more money. So, all right. Awesome. Well, this was cool. I'm super excited about meeting up every week and doing this going forward. So guys, if you are listening to this, I don't know when this is going to drop. We don't even have a name yet. We got absolutely nothing. We literally set this shit up this morning. So by the time this drops, hopefully we'll have a name. I don't know if you're watching it on YouTube, maybe you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify or whatever, but it would be really awesome if you subscribe, if you're on YouTube, or follow us on Apple, Spotify. I don't even know what the tasks are. We'll learn those also. Leave a comment, do all those things. We would really appreciate it. We're going to be trying to engage with you as much as possible. So, thank you, Brad. Have a great day, and we'll talk next week.
Talk next week.
All right. Bye, guys.